If you park on a city street and they're calling for an ice storm, and you have an opportunity to move to the driveway or the garage or a parking lot, probably a good idea.
There's no feeling like, okay, I've done everything I can. I'm standing on the brakes. And you're in a hill, you can't come off the brakes, especially when that's the house up there. And you got lights on, so everybody's seeing you at night.
And you can't do the hit and run, can you?
No, you really can't.
I had it in 1990. I was working the overnight shift across town. I tried to drive up one night during an ice storm, and I got to, I believe it was Braddock Mountain. And you couldn't. The trucks were all sideways, so the entire thing was shut down, and there was no other way to do it. And then 15 years ago here, I was coming down that little slope Eagle School Road where there's now a traffic circle. At the time, I think it was a four-way, at least a three-way stop sign intersection kind of deal. And there was a fellow sitting down there in a Prius, older fellow. And I'm coming down the hill, and it's nothing but ice. And I'm sliding, and he's still sitting there, and I'm thinking, hurry up, dude. You got to move through this intersection because I can't stop. And it was almost like almost a comedy because it was like the slowest speed accident you've ever seen in your life because I wasn't going fast.
Right.
So I probably slid, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 miles an hour into the back of his Prius. There was pretty much no damage whatsoever. But he got out of the car like I had just murdered his entire family. Created a big scene in the intersection. And I show him my driver's license, and it's, of course, a Maryland driver's license. And he goes, "Well, no, we got to call the police because you're out of state. You could say this was my fault." It grew into a big production. So the sheriffs show up. We're still in the intersection. While we're in the intersection, car comes sliding down the road and hits the back of my car, knocks the bumper loose. Now the bumper is like hanging on the ground, right? Sheriff's deputy is there. A second car comes down and finishes off the rest of my bumper, which is now on the road. And I don't remember who the deputy was. He picks up the bumper, hands it to me, and he goes, "This just ain't your day, is it?" I laughed and I said, "No, it's not." Via telephone, Bob Kucken. Robert, good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir and sirs.
Yeah, hey, we got the better of this one tonight. We didn't get anywhere near as bad of a situation as we were thinking we might get with the ice. What happened?
No, it wasn't quite as bad. The air was a little drier, a little longer as it first all started to move in, so it took it longer to kind of get its momentum, and as a result, we didn't get quite as much precipitation, therefore not quite as much ice. And the good news now is we're headed toward warmer temperatures. We're right at 32. Within the next hour or two, we'll be above that, and we're headed towards 40 degrees by noontime. So this will all be a memory in just a little while.
All
and we're looking good for tomorrow.
I want to get into the midweek projected possible snow in a moment, but first I want to do our annual snow, sleet, freezing, rain. What changes, what causes each to do what they do? Go ahead.
Oh, we want to go there. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we can do that. Okay. Freezing rain, since that's what we were dealing with here this morning for the most part, that's a situation where the air above the surface is a little bit warmer than the air at the surface. So we can have a freezing temperature at the surface. The air 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 feet above could be 34, 35 degrees. So everything that falls as liquid. And just that little surface zone of freezing temperatures allows the water to hit the ground and freeze. It comes down as water. Sleet, you've got a mix of temperatures where the upper levels a little further up starts as rain, freezes into a pellet on the way down, and lands kind of as a grain on the ground and stays frozen. And then snow, usually you've got colder air at all levels and temperatures well below freezing. And so the precipitation starts as snow, stays as snow, lands as snow, and piles up.
Okay, throw hail in there.
Yeah, that's where I was going.
Well, hail's more fun because what you got with that is that has to do with updrafts and downdrafts, and most of the time with thunderstorms, of course. The air lifts the water droplets back up into the atmosphere until they freeze in that colder air, comes back down. The wind is strong enough to push that little pellet of ice back up into the freezing air, some more precipitation. It starts to get a little bigger. Finally, it gets too heavy for the updraft, to hold it, and it falls down as hail, as an ice ball of varying sizes depending on the intensity of those winds.
Did you guys know that? The rain fights gravity on the way down?
No, it's just like it's like a pearl, right? It just kind of grows and then drops.
Well, and sometimes
I didn't know. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Here, if we get hail, it's usually pea size. But a buddy of mine in Texas routinely gets these baseball, softball size.
Everything's
hail.
bigger in Texas.
Well, that's true. So, but what makes that different? The
Including
size of the actual. I mean, some of these hailstones are huge.
Literally, it's the strength of the wind that is pushing the hailstone back up into the atmosphere where the rain and the cold air is hitting it and allowing it to grow. Some of the thunderstorms you get out in the plains and that, super huge, super strong with the updrafts and downdrafts, and the wind that's carrying that hailstone back up is literally strong enough to push that back to the freezing level again until finally it gets to be even baseball size and it gets too heavy and it falls. That kind of tells you the intensity of the storm and the winds that are circulating upward and then the downdrafts behind it. That's where sometimes the downdraft winds can cause damage that, could look like a tornado, and they figure out later on that it was, downdraft winds or straight line winds. But that's what it's all about, the intensity of the storm, the lift that goes with those winds as it's coming across.
You've explained hail before, Bob, and I either never heard it as in detail as you did it, or I forgot. But I did not remember that hail comes from the rain falling and then just kind of reversing its course and climbing back up before it falls back down again.
That is the case. It literally the wind that's being pushed back up into the storm is stronger, and it can carry the weight of that drop of rain ice that starts to, again, grow in size as the winds continue to circulate. Finally, it gets too heavy, and it ultimately does fall down. So
my iPhone says Tuesday into Wednesday, maybe 7-8 inches of snow. What does Bob Kucken say?
I was just looking at some stuff this morning. I was almost going to go there in the forecast, and I thought I'm going to sit back on this one another 24 hours because the data this morning looks considerably different than it did yesterday as far as projecting the amount of snow. There will be some accumulating snow. It'll be an interesting few days here. We're going to have some more slick stuff on Saturday before we even get to Tuesday. I'd count on some shovelable snow. Now, whether it's going to be 2 or 3 inches, which is kind of what it's showing this morning, it was more consistent over the last day or two wanting to project the higher number. Sometimes as you get closer and you get a little more data, it will modify. So I don't know if this one is an anomaly and we'll get back to later on this afternoon and it'll be right back to where it was, or if it's going to project lower for Tuesday, Wednesday. But, yeah, some slippery stuff coming, potential for a good accumulation, a big accumulation, but I'm going to need a little more information here over the next 24 hours. We'll know more tomorrow.
What is your Saturday, Sunday slick stuff you were talking about?
We're going to get another wave of freezing precipitation similar to what we had this morning on Saturday morning. It may be a little more sleet-based, a little less freezing rain, but there'll be some freezing rain in there too. And I think the time frame is going to take a little longer for it to warm up on Saturday. It's not going to get as warm as fast. So we may have a pretty slippery Saturday morning through lunchtime before we get back to 35, 38 degrees and everything kind of melts off again. So similar to this morning, a little longer lasting. Saturday morning, sleep in, get around to your stuff in the afternoon. You'll be fine.
How helping are these weather events for the drought that the Eastern Panhandle has been in for the last 2 years?
Well, the precipitation in general is a great thing as long as the moisture can get into the ground. If the ground is frozen solid, then the water runs off into the rivers and the creeks and that. It's ultimately helpful regardless. But if the ground can be more like a sponge like it is in the springtime and can soak up the water and hold it, that's going to alleviate the drought results a lot quicker, than it will in the wintertime when the ground surface is frozen so the water can't get down there.
Hey, Bob, I remember when the snowstorm of a couple of weeks ago was coming through, and actually with any big weather event, there's the U.S. model and then there's the European model that always shows differences of where a hurricane's going to go, where a snowstorm's going to go, or whatever. What are the fundamental differences and assumptions between those?
Feet and meters?
Well, it's the storm tracks tend to be different.
Yeah, well, and similarly, like when you look at, and this is real evident in the summertime, like during hurricane season, they call it the spaghetti model. and you'll see a map, and there'll be like 14 different tasks, and they're all different ways of computing data, projecting data out, and some of them, depending on what methodology they use, how much they magnify what piece of the puzzle that they're looking at, it'll come up with different answers. It's not anything like, a straight math problem, 2 + 2 = 4 all the time. It's not like that. It'll vary information depending on the interpretation of that model. So you've got different ways of it looking at the same data. The data is all the same. How it interprets and then projects what's going to happen next is the difference. So that's just the difference in the way the models are built, the people that make it, how they see what's going to happen next.
But in terms of the U.S. versus the European, is there fundamentally, is there an accepted way of calculating these things here that is different than the way things are calculated fundamentally across the pond?
I think the methodology is pretty much the same. Again, some of the inner workings of the functions, the actual mathematics and that are built into these programs will project and calculate things out differently. And sometimes the data changes quickly too, then that affects the model pretty quickly. And that's kind of almost what I'm thinking might have happened with the model here this morning that talks about Tuesday. How it goes from a 7 or 8 inch accumulation to a 2 or 3 inch accumulation, there's some difference in how it's interpreting what it's reading and then what happens next when it puts the numbers through. So fundamentally they're the same, but again, different ideology, different thoughts of what matters more, I guess you could say, as far as the projection is concerned.
Is there any evidence at all that snowfall is affected by the number of children who sleep with their pajamas turned inside out? Because that was, when I was growing up, I knew that had a fundamental impact on whether or not the snowstorm was coming.
Did it work for you?
Well, I lived in Northern Virginia, so no, not all that often, but that was the hope.
That was my question. Did you want this to happen? Was this part of your plan? Or?
Well, yeah, that was
snow day, baby.
Wasn't that you guys? That if you wanted a snowstorm, you slept with your pajamas inside out.
I never heard that before.
No? Oh,
I never have either.
Oh, okay.
It's a Virginia thing.
I guess.
I'm going to start doing that.
I have a more general question for you about this winter, Bob. Why does it suck?
Why is it different than any other winter that sucks?
Yeah, that's the question. We had 2-degree temperatures and
it's been pretty typical. We had that cold blast for a week and a half. That was just bitter and brutal and made you think all kinds of bad things about winter.
But it was needed.
It makes you stronger. Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
Well, it kills the bugs.
well, they say deep freeze kills the bugs.
Yeah, that's a character builder, too, that we all have to live through. But at least looking at it, looks as though maybe we've seen the coldest of the cold. We're not seeing anything in the next 14 days to 21 days in the longer projected models that shows any kind of real sharp cold air push. No real major warming either, just kind of a general normalish kind of first half of the month here. So that's a good thing. Let's get closer to March, keep on trudging.
All right, Bob, do you have a Super Bowl pick?
Oh,
For
I
the
would
temperature.
love to see the Eagles win.
Eagles? All right.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to happen. I would love to see it.
Well, who do you think will win?
I think Kansas City's going to end up winning, although I hate saying I don't like that that's coming out of my mouth, but
there's a lot of backlash against Kansas City. Dylan, put your ears on a second. Tell me who you think is going to win the Super Bowl. Let me get out of our sports room there. What do you have, Dill?
I refuse to pick against Patrick Mahomes.
It's a safe bet. I mean,
Chiefs by 3. I will say the Eagles, they make it very tempting to pick against the Chiefs, but I just can't do it.
What score do you have, Dylan?
I'll give it like 23-20.
Okay. And what's the spread right now? What's the latest?
Chiefs 1.5.
1.5. Okay. Matt, what do you have?
I think I'll take the Chiefs and the refs.
Chiefs and the refs. That was rebuked by everybody in the NFL yesterday, by the way. So
Of course it was.
What do you have as a score?
Oh, I don't know. 27-23.
Mr. Sportsball?
Eagles, 27-23.
Eagles? Since there's never been a three-peat in the NFL, I'm not going to pick the Chiefs. I'm going to take the Eagles. I'm going to take the Eagles 31-27. How's that sound?
There's a built-in bias that humans have that if something's never happened before,
Yes.
that it can't happen ever.
I can't
Why not? I'm gonna go against
Well,
that.
maybe they can pull it off against the Chiefs. You know, I mean, you know, the Lions were the big story all season, and
Yep.
that came unglued. But hopefully, the Eagles can push on through. And
As a native Pittsburgher, me picking a Philadelphia team, you know, that's not easy to do.
I would prefer to see the Eagles win, but
But
I'm
you-
going
you're
with the
going to
Chiefs.
choose. Dylan, what were you about to say?
I said I can't guarantee that I won't change my mind by the sports mix tomorrow on Friday when we probably do our pick there. But it's Mahomes. It's the Chiefs.
I don't hate the Chiefs. Like, so many people are turned off by the Chiefs. They're like Chiefs fatigue. I don't have that. I think if you're a champion, it's great. Keep winning as long as you can because it doesn't last forever.
They got the Swifties behind them.
You know, I mean, and that's cool too. I don't have any hatred for Taylor Swift. You know, there's a lot of Taylor Swift hatred out there too. You know, enjoy. You know, what the heck.
there's too much angst out there in general. Yes, I agree.
Bob, thank you. Appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Have a great day, sir.
You too.